Welcome to class 24 on judging information on the web. This video is going to be a bit more practical and applied than the other ones in this section. Um, in the social epistemology section, we've been talking a lot about the kinds of distortions of critical thinking that happen in online interaction. And this video is just going to be covering the more practical side of things. So for this class, I had you read a guide or portions of a guide to judging information on the web by a guy named Mike Caulfield, which I like a lot because it really feels like it was written by someone who actually uses the internet to get information rather than someone steeped in the old world of newspapers and libraries complaining about the new world. One of the things that Caulfield announces he's doing early on that I appreciate is that he's focusing on general strategies and techniques rather than doing what a lot of people do, which is just put out checklists of questions you should ask about any online source. These checklists often come with little acronyms to help you remember them, including one with the unfortunate acronym CRAP: currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. I mean, this is all well and good. You've seen me advocate checklists of questions for all sorts of things throughout this course. But what Caulfield does is deeper because he's outlining strategies. He can dig into the social and economic forces that structure the information you see on the web. So it's more principle-based in a lot of ways and more deeply epistemological. So he's got a 4-step system for getting closer to the truth. And right away, I like the fact that he doesn't talk about getting the truth itself, just getting closer to it, which is all we can expect in a practical situation. Step 1, check for previous work. Use existing fact checkers and explainer websites. Step 2, go upstream from the source. Find your source's source. I find this one incredibly useful, and a lot of people don't appreciate what's going on with the chain of information that happens with online sources. Read laterally. Read what other people say about the source. And then circle back. Look at the source again, knowing what you know now. In general, you should try these strategies in sequence, and at each stage, if you find success, your work might be done. And this is important because a lot of fact-checking actually requires you to decide how important the issue is. And this is not something that a lot of fact-checking guides or research guides really talk about. A lot of times you're just looking stuff up out of idle curiosity, at least if you're me. Other times you're going to need to go deeper. For instance, anytime you want to forward something to other people, you need to do some due diligence, some basic research, because you don't want to just repeat things that are completely unfounded. And still other times you're going to need to go really deep if you're going to make a personal decision based on something. So you always have to be thinking about the importance of the question. It's not going to be this black-white issue where you just say, okay, this is truth, this is not, right? You have to talk about degrees of confidence and degrees of verification. So let's look at these steps in detail. Check for previous work. And I think this one is great. What he says is, even if you don't agree with their exact analysis, fact-checking websites and subject wikis have done a lot of your legwork for you. And this is another important thing that people don't always think about when they talk about fact-checking. Sometimes what you're doing is just checking a simple factual statement, right? So I saw a picture of a flying fish online, and I was impressed with how big the fins are that act like wings. And I'm like, this is also a thing where I'm checking out of pure curiosity, right? I'm like, is that real? Do they really look like that? It was an amazing photo. Um, so I just go over to Wikipedia and I see that, oh, on a Wikipedia level of um, confirmation, yeah, actually, the flying fish really do have these big fins. Um, so uh, if you're just checking that level of pure fact, um, that's one kind of thing. If you're dealing with a political issue, you might need to both check a fact and, interpretation or analysis, right? And generally, fact-checking websites and wikis are fine for just giving you a basic um, the basic factual statement, and then you're going to disagree with analysis. This comes up especially with things that are half true or require more context, right? But certainly you can ground yourself initially just by going to uh, uh, a fact-checking website or a wiki. That'll get you down there in basic information. Caulfield also suggests search options. So not everyone knows this, but when you're doing a Google search, if you type site colon, you can restrict your search to a particular site. So he suggests site colon Snopes.com or site colon PolitiFact.com. There are other search options you can use like that. You can restrict your search, for instance, to only PDF files. The other thing that he emphasizes here is that the subject wikis will have done a lot of legwork for you. That is, um, they've already gathered together all of the basic factual information, the basic primary or secondary sources that you need. And if you're just disagreeing about interpretation, you can go to those primary or secondary sources, right? And as we'll see in a second, fact-checking websites and wikis count as tertiary sources. Okay, so he's got some lists here, um, and I can vouch for a lot of these. Well, I can vouch for some of these. PolitiFact and Snopes I use a lot. Um, Quote investigator is down in the specialized category. I use that as a philosopher all the time because people will attribute quotes to, I don't know, the Buddha or Socrates. And it's like, that doesn't sound like him. And quote investigator is nice because they do a deep dive and they give you a history. It's cool. NPR Fact Check is good. The other thing that's nice is about Caulfield's lists is that he goes across he covers an international context. So he's got Univision for Spanish language in America and then non-US things as well. Okay. So in this context, I gotta just say I am pro Wikipedia. You have almost certainly encountered teachers in high school or whatever who are very anti Wikipedia, and I think this comes from failing to understand what Wikipedia is supposed to be for and why it's useful and why, in fact, people use it all the time. Um, so this is what Caulfield says about Wikipedia. While Wikipedia must be approached with caution, especially with articles that are covering contentious subjects or evolving events, it is often the best source to get a consensus viewpoint on a subject, right? So Wikipedia can give you sort of the baseline common sense for most issues, right? Because it has evolved from a bunch of sources. And the other thing that's important here is that Wikipedia has again done your legwork for you. If you find a claim expressed in a Wikipedia article, you can almost always follow the footnote on the claim to a reliable source, right? So Wikipedia is an excellent step one, right? if you are researching a complex question, starting with the sources, resources, and summaries provided by Wikipedia can give you a substantial running start on an issue. This is great. And like I said, for a lot of basic fact checking, that might be all you need to do. The only thing that I think is really weird about Wikipedia is its set of priorities, which actually match the broader populace rather than the specialized idea of experts, right? And so one thing that happens is you can find Wikipedia articles on the most trivial bits of pop culture. So this is the sociologist Kieran Healy posting to Mastodon. Wikipedia continues to defeat all comers. Why is that? Well, they've got a whole article on Steve Austin's Bionics. Steve Austin was a fictional character from a fictional cyborg from a 70s TV show that I grew up watching. It's like, you're not going to find that in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Mostly it's funny. So, all right, I want to talk about levels of sources. This is important. You probably got this lesson in high school history, and I just want to reinforce it. You've got primary sources and secondary sources. The primary source is a source in a position to have direct knowledge of an object or event, and a secondary source is one that is relying on primary sources, right? And so this has its roots in history. So here is an example. This is on the right. You see a book about the Haitian Revolution by C.L.R. James. The Haitian Revolution was the only successful slave revolt in human history by most measures. Amazing bit of world history. So C.L.R. James wrote a very famous history of it called Black Jacobins. That's a secondary source, right? What he's doing there is summarizing information that's found in primary sources, like the thing on the left, which is a letter from Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint Louverture was the leader of the Haitian Revolution, an amazing figure in world history, a slave who freed a nation. Okay. A lot of what you deal with on the web are not primary or secondary sources. They're tertiary sources. They are sources that summarize secondary sources. So you're several removes from the actual object. You just have to deal with that. Wikipedia is a tertiary source. They say that themselves. And they've got this weird rule, actually, that says that the Wikipedia editors are only supposed to cite secondary sources. They're tertiary. You should cite secondary sources. Your secondary sources should cite primary sources. They don't let you skip levels. And I know some people who edit Wikipedia find that frustrating, but it does give you a clear sense of what the epistemological role of Wikipedia is. Okay. In a lot of ways, to do fact-checking research, you need to go upstream. So if you start on Wikipedia, you need to go upstream to your source. But also, if you just you're seeing something online, right, that got forwarded to you, you also need to be going upstream, and that's a different stream. So this is the deal. There are many websites out there whose business model is essentially steal content from actual reporters. And even places that do original content are often piggybacking on other people's reporting. And some of this goes back to before the internet. There are syndication services like AP and Reuters, which were ways back in the newspaper days that newspapers would pool their resources to get information out there. And so these syndication services would write articles that then appear in several different newspapers. Either way, if you're dealing with a syndicated source or with essentially a stealing source, you are there's a stream that you have to go up. So let me give you an example. This is Raw Story. Raw Story largely just reprints other people's research, right? So let me get all the annotations here. Raw Story mostly just recycles other people's reporting. And the important link is generally at the end of the first paragraph. So apparently, a middle school teacher said that the Hamas attack on Israel was a hoax. Um, so, how can you find out about this? Well, Raw Story has an article on it. Um, but what you really want to do is go to the first link in the at the end of the first paragraph, which takes you to the Washington Post, which is the actual source of information. And right away, you can see the headline lets you know that they are relying on other people's reporting, right? Report. Raw Story hasn't done any actual research here. And a lot of their business model is actually looking at someone else's reporting, finding the most inflammatory fact about it, and then putting that fact in the headline to gather clicks. So this is the primary source here. Montgomery teacher denies Israel raid, Hamas raid accuses Israel of organ theft. And so this is a middle school teacher who said something false and unhinged, and that's I'm not sure how newsworthy that is. There are a lot of middle school teachers out there who aren't epistemologically well grounded. Okay, so another example. This is a push poll. So there's a headline: "Do you support patriotic bikers defending Trump's inauguration?" And this is this is something I clipped from the Caulfield textbook, right? So this pops up, and the um, again, you're wondering what's going on here. This is clearly slanted, that sort of thing. Well, you can always get to, and this is just his practical advice, highlight the name of the source, right click if you're on a PC, and you can search Google for that source. So even if you don't have that link, like in the previous example, you can just find the source, right click, and Google it. Another weird thing about the modern media landscape is that even on the most respectable websites, if you scroll down far enough, you will find scammy sponsored content. So this is CNN Business. You think it would be fairly prestigious, but you scroll down to the bottom, and 4 simple ways to make extra cash online. That's a scam. In general, you need to be careful about when you're on websites, seeing what is actual content from that website and what is an ad designed to look like the content on that website. And so here, paid partner content is going to be an important sign. So we've talked about getting your sources source in the sense of looking at a website that borrows content and going back to the people who do the primary reporting. We also looked at advertisements that masquerade as content. The other thing to think about is syndication. So here's just an article on the New York Times. We start just with the New York Times webpage, and you can see right here it's got news from AP and Reuters. So this all of the stuff in this column is not New York Times reporting. It's reporting done by the wire services, they call them, because they used to send their reports back over telegraph. But these are news syndication services, and they are actually very reliable. They were initially created by consortiums of newspapers to send out reporters who would send back reports over telegram. Um, uh, but they're now news gathering agencies that are actually often a step removed from the forces that bias a lot of newspaper reporting. So one of the things you can do when you click through on the article is note that the name of the syndication service is often just right there in the byline, right? So it will say, I think this one this says by Reuters. Another thing that the syndication services do is they'll just plant cameras at press conferences, and so you can get the raw footage of the whole press conference. And so often links like that are things like this. This is not a press conference, though. This is people digging through the rubble at church. It's in Gaza, so it was bombed. Okay. Third piece of advice, read laterally. Lateral readers don't spend much time on a page until they've first gotten their bearings by looking at what other sites and resources say about the source at which they are looking. So if you're on a site and you're not familiar with it, you don't know how you don't normally go there for information, Google the site name. Find out what their bias is, what their angle is. Often the Wikipedia page on the website can give you some basic information like this is a neoconservative website or this is a leftist website or whatever. Caulfield is a kind of guy who has a lot of tabs open in his browser, and I sympathize with that. And you do this if you are reading laterally because you want to be reading your main source, and then there's some comment about the source, and maybe a few other layers of comments. And that helps you get a bigger picture. Caulfield's final piece of advice: circle back. If at any point you fail, if the source you find is not trustworthy, if complex questions emerge, or if the claim turns out to have multiple subclaims, all of these things happen all the time, you circle back and start a new process. Rewrite the claim. This is important. How you phrase a question is so important for what kind of answers you get. And sometimes if you do have to do the research cycle repeatedly, you're going to need to actually reword your claim a bunch. And all of this depends on the practicality of what you're trying to do, right? So you go back again and you start with a tertiary source, a fact-checking site, a wiki, but do a new one. All right, so that's just a basic strategy, and this is part of the very practical part of this course, and I encourage all of this. I've mentioned that dealing with online disinformation and propaganda is a major motivation for the way I'm shaping this course now. So I recommend these techniques strongly.